Hey friends, Peggy Hall back with you from thehealthyamerican.org. This is a video I've been meaning to make because I'm broadcasting now. It's basically getting toward the end of October, and I'm currently on the east coast of Florida. Last year, I went through Hurricane Milton, and I also survived like dozens and dozens of tornadoes that were just hitting right like on my street and a couple of blocks away. And people that I know about a mile away lost their homes, the roofs were torn off. So I've sort of been a little bit on edge. However, I have to say that it has been a relatively quiet hurricane season, at least here in the Atlantic. And I want to share my screen because I thought this was a really interesting headline that I saw from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. It's a government organization known as NOAA. And here they say, this was back in May. They predicted an above normal 2025 Atlantic hurricane season. And they thought there were going to be dozens of named storms and at least 3 or 4 or more hurricanes that were going to make landfall. And I want to dig into this and I want to share with you why I think it's been a relatively quiet season. Let me know in a comment if you are thinking along the same lines that I am. And I'm going to share with you an email from a healthy American who also lives in Florida. And he's going to tell me his idea in terms of why it's been so quiet. He's lived in Florida for decades. And then I'm going to share with you good news out of Florida and Tennessee, kind of a double-edged sword, but we're talking about legislation that was passed banning chemtrails. So if you can follow the thread, I'm going to talk about chemtrails and hurricanes or lack thereof, and let's see if we can put it all together. I do want to thank the sponsor. So we're going to hop over to noblegoldinvestments.com. Friends, I just did an interview with the CEO, Colin Plume, and I'll air that for you later this week. And he'll tell you all about silver and how you could get in on diversifying your investments that way. But what I do want to share with you is the website, and that is here over at noblegoldinvestments.com. And the message I have for you is that gold has gone mainstream. And basically, you're seeing it everywhere. The prices keep climbing. And every day, more and more Americans are catching on to the power of gold. So the question is, how do you actually take advantage of it? How do you invest in a way that's safe and simple and built for the long run? Well, that's where Noble Gold Investments come in. You can give them a call, 877-646-5347. You'll speak to someone in the United States. It's a family-owned business. They focus on education first. There's no hard sell. And all of the individuals that work there are trained. They are specialists, and they are there to help investors like you go from confused to confident, go from wondering what's next to knowing exactly what to do. So whether you want to roll over an old 401k, for example, maybe getting a gold IRA, or you want the physical coins and bars like you're seeing here, you can get those delivered right to your home. And Noble Gold makes the process simple, safe, and stress-free. So you'll get step-by-step guidance. They are the experts in the field. So when you're working with Noble Gold Investments, you can protect and grow your wealth because it's not just their job, it's their commitment. And I want to show you, here we have the bonus for October. You're going to get a 10-ounce silver. This is a solid silver American flag bar and a 1-ounce silver American Eagle proof coin. Now, Colin told me, and I also read in the headlines, that the price of silver has been going up and up and up, making records and breaking records. And a few months ago, when they offered this bonus, that was around $350 value. Now it's around a $700 value. So check it out. Of course, there's always a risk of investments of any kind. Get your questions answered by the experts. I'll have a link for you in the description box below. That's noblegoldinvestments.com. Friends, I'm glad to say that it has been relatively quiet here where I am on the east coast of Florida when it comes to hurricanes. I went through my first hurricane last year, and I'm telling you, it was pretty terrifying. It wasn't even the hurricane that was that bad. It was the nonstop tornadoes. And that's not something that I really bargained for. Luckily, we are in a place that's relatively secure in terms of a house being made out of concrete. But still, there were people that I know who lost their homes, who had the roofs blown off, who had a lot of storm damage. And we actually were listening in to the media, to the news, so that we could stay up to date. And even the newscasters were saying that that number of tornadoes in such a rapid succession in such a concentrated area was highly unusual. I've done videos on this channel before letting you know about Project Cirrus, which is the government basically interfering with hurricanes. So we know that that happens. But my question is, why has it been so quiet this year when there have been so many hurricanes doing so much devastation over the many months and the last few years? So here you'll see that the hurricane season was predicted to be above normal, meaning more and more hurricanes. And this was what they thought. This is from the National organization of, what is it called again? National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Basically, it's a government agency, so you can trust them. But here they said that for 2025, they thought that it would be 60%. How do you like these numbers? 60% above normal, 30% near normal, and only 10% below normal. Well, we are far below normal. Here they thought there would be well over a dozen named storms, hurricanes, half a dozen or more, and major hurricanes, meaning that they would make landfall 3 to 5 hurricanes. And we are just on the cusp of November, and that pretty much the end of November, as I understand it, wraps up the hurricane season. Here you'll see they have data going back to 2009. And this, we were told, is the first season that there was no hurricane at the peak of the hurricane season, which ironically was September 10th. Does that date ring a bell for anyone? All right. What I want to do is share with you an email. Actually, there were a couple of hurricanes. Let me share this with you first. There were a few hurricanes that did make landfall late in the season, and I want to share that data with you. I thought it was interesting. So going back to 1985, at the end of November, November 21st, there was Hurricane Kate. And then in 1998, October 29th, so today's October 20th, Hurricane Mitch made landfall in Honduras, then in Mexico, and finally it hit the Keys on November 5th. So I thought that was interesting. I personally don't care for hurricanes being named after people. I mean, imagine your name is Katrina and you are forever associated with Hurricane Katrina or others. Hurricane Helene is another one that comes to mind. I think they should just name them with the year and the number. So it's like, 85-1, that would have been hurricane number 1 in 1985. That's how I sees it. Let me know what you think. In 2005, just about this time of the year, October 21st, Hurricane Wilma hit Mexico, and then it made a U-turn. Gee, that sounds not suspicious at all, and hit Florida's southwest coast at Cape Romano on October 24th. So there are some that come late in the season. Hurricane Sandy, I have a lovely puppy dog, Sandy. There she is. Well, I don't know if you can see her. I'll have to show a picture. She's sleeping here. Hurricane Sandy made landfall in New York, October 29th. That's pretty late in the season. And then in 2018, October 10th, Hurricane Michael crushed the Panhandle. And sadly, there were deaths there. So that's the data that I found in terms of hurricanes kind of coming late in the season. By and large, it was very mild. I think the climate in Florida is amazing. I love the humidity. There's nothing oppressive. I love being on both coasts, California and Florida, so it suits me just fine. What I thought was really interesting when I was doing my research, let me just touch on this briefly. As you know, the government does, in fact, interfere in hurricanes. So this was called Project Storm Fury, and this was back in 1962, between 1962 and 1983. It's described here as an ambitious experimental program of research on hurricane modification carried out, as I say, between 1962 and 83. So what they did is they did cloud seeding with silver iodide. I've done videos before where I broke down how harmful that is to the environment, to humans, to animals. And I don't know about you, but I don't think the government has stopped interfering in weather. They certainly have been doing it for a long time, and there are dozens and dozens, probably hundreds and hundreds of patents that you can search about weather modification. What I want to do is share with you an email that came in from a healthy American, and this is Mark. He says, I came across a summary. This was just a few days ago. He said, I thought you'd be interested. Of course, the media won't relate the phenomenon of fewer hurricanes to, how do I put it? Can I call them chemtrails on this channel now? Is YouTube banning that? I usually call it spraying in the sky. So it's all tied together in terms of what I think is really going on. So let me backtrack just a little bit. Florida and Tennessee are two states that actually passed legislation banning spraying in the skies. Now, it's kind of interesting because the spraying in the skies actually happens at a federal level. So the states like Florida and Tennessee, which I'm grateful that they brought this legislation and at least brought it into the public view in terms of having conversations about the spraying in the skies. I don't believe that it is condensation from airplanes. If that were the case, then we would have that every single day because planes fly every single day. But there are days when the skies are clear, and you can feed me all sorts of gobbledygook and slosh the hogwash about, oh, the atmospheric pressure and the temperature. No, it's the same temperature one day to the next, where I have noticed that there was spraying in the skies and not spraying in the skies. So that doesn't hold water. The other thing is, if this came from airplanes, the pilots really need to go back to aviation school because their flight patterns are all over the place. I'm sure, and by sure, I mean I'm not sure, that they're flying in X grid patterns or tic-tac-toe patterns or circular patterns. It doesn't make sense. You would be able to do an overlay of flight patterns and see how they match the sky. Now, don't slosh the hogwash saying that it's the winds that are carrying the trails. Friends, I've done tons of videos and photos, and you probably have as well, and you'll see that being sprayed, and it just expands. The wind isn't blowing it anywhere, making those patterns. You can bring me all the arguments you want, but none of them hold water. I've got a whole playlist about weather, and that's where you'll find my coverage on chemtrails, and also over at my Substack, peggyhall.substack.com. What I wanted to share with you is the good news, and this is Florida. How about them apples? Breathe deep, Florida. I'm going to remind them of that if they are ever try to impose the suffocation devices. This is called the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, and this is where you can make a complaint if you see spraying in the skies. Now, in the time that I've been here, I have rarely seen spraying in the skies. I have photographed that for you. I've brought videos for you on it. But I would say that at least where I am in Southeast Florida, the skies are generally clear. I'm not that far from the ocean, and that's probably a part of it as well, that there are trade winds that will continue to keep the skies clear, and I'm grateful for that. Now, also in the state of Tennessee, they passed legislation to ban the spraying in the skies. But as I say, this comes from it's literally federal airspace, and they are still holding to their wrong notion that it is condensation from airplanes. The reason why I reject this so vehemently, and I'm not on board with others who are saying, oh, they've changed the jet fuel, and it's the jet fuel that is lingering in the air, creating these trails. That, if you follow that path, is going to lead you to reducing the number of flights and reducing your travel and reducing your carbon footprint and blaming it on you, and then reducing the number of miles that you can drive and your gas-powered appliances and not being able to have a bonfire at the beach or a barbecue in your backyard. So no, I am not in favor of any of that. But I will say that, and I don't want that legislation to be pushed in that direction, blaming it on us. But I will say that it has brought the conversation into the mainstream. And for that, I'm very happy. And here is the governor's website in Florida. And this was back in May. And the headline says Governor Ron DeSantis celebrates action to protect Floridians from chemical and technological interference. And that's related to that law. So I wanted to kind of lay that foundation for you because my friend Mark, who sent me this email, he is putting together the pieces. And I agree with him that the headlines that we're seeing, such as this, as of early October, no hurricanes have made landfall in the US in 2025, a rare calm that hasn't happened since 2015. I think this is from USA Today. Despite multiple category 4 and 5 storms forming in the Atlantic, you see, they want to still push the fear mongering. Systems like Umberto, Gabrielle, and Imelda have curved away from the US thanks to a confluence of unusual weather conditions. Well, they're telling us that La Nina conditions are forming and the Gulf waters are usually warm. And that's why the forecasters say that the late season threats remain very much on the radar. You see, the Weather Center and the Weather Channel and people that have the YouTube channels all about weather, they're not going to get a lot of hits and a lot of interest if there are no hurricanes. So they love it when there are a lot of disturbances. So Mark is saying that because of the banishing of the spraying in the skies, which you know and I know is very likely, and by very likely, I'm going to say definitely related to the strange weather patterns that we have seen over the last several years. And people have spotted that, they have noted it, they have tracked it, they have seen where these hurricanes are intensifying in a very unusual pattern. And it's not something that is that new. As I say, weather manipulation has been going on for a long time, but I think it's because all eyes are on this. It's in the mainstream conversations now. And because the skies are relatively clear, they have not been able to use whatever magic they're using. And I'm using that word intentionally because it is kind of hocus pocus. And they are intentionally, I would say, using perhaps genuine weather patterns and then intensifying them to do more damage. You're going to ask, Peggy, why would they do that? Let me pose the question to you and think about it. I know that you're a critical thinker. You're here as a healthy American, so you know how to read between the lies. And there are a few things that come to mind right off the bat. And number one, pushing the fear mongering, the terror and the fear. And I admitted to being riveted to the news, watching as they were tracking Hurricane Milton and also these tornadoes coming in and making sure that I knew what was going on. I wasn't going to go walk outside and take my dog out for a walk or something when the tornado was appearing. So it definitely gets your heart rate going. It gets the cortisol up. I would say the fear and the terror, that is definitely part of what they manipulate. And when they manipulate your emotions, you are much more likely to accept whatever their solution is to the situation that they may have, if not caused, they may have manipulated, orchestrated, manufactured, or definitely magnified. The other thing is we see in the aftermath of these storms is an undue reliance on the federal government. Now, here in Florida, Florida is very well prepared. And if you want to watch my videos about Milton, you'll see exactly what the governor did and how the state knows what to do. It's kind of ironic. There are a couple of memes that are going around about Floridians like, I'll take on that category 5, bring on the cat 5 hurricane. But if it's under 60 degrees, then they start complaining because it's a little too cold. So Floridians know how to get through the hurricanes. They know how to prepare. They know what to do. They know what not to do. And I believe that's also because the state, not the federal government, the state had a large number of items that they prepare. In fact, at the local grocery store, there were all sorts of trucks that were related to utilities and so forth, and they were ready to go. They were already mobilized. The governor also had enough gasoline stores for the state. And as I say, the emergency responders were ready to go. So I think that gives people a great deal of peace of mind. The state should be responsible for what happens in the state. Now, You may have even been on the receiving end of FEMA funds and FEMA help in some kind of natural disaster over the years. I actually stayed in a FEMA camp when I was in New Orleans doing animal rescue in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. So I'm somewhat familiar with FEMA and what they do on the ground. I couldn't stay in that tent because I was getting asphyxiated by whatever they were piping into it. I ended up sleeping in the rental car. There were no hotels or anything. So I have a video about that as well. But I am not in favor of pushing this reliance on the federal government. Why should the federal government, meaning your tax dollars, pay for what happens in another state? Each state is basically sovereign. Each state collects its own state taxes, whether it's through income tax or property tax or sales tax. So the state should mobilize its own resources and personnel and everything else to take care of what happens in the state. I don't care. In fact, I wholeheartedly reject this notion of relying on the federal government and turning to the federal government as the first source of recovery. I just don't think that's the right way to go. I also noticed that after these disasters, that the insurance claims, of course, are many, and then the insurance companies jack up their rates or they just leave the state altogether. So in California, basically, you can get earthquake insurance from the state of California. You can get fire insurance from the state of California. So there's no competition, meaning you pay whatever they tell you. And if you don't like the service that they're providing, too bad, because there's no one else to choose from. That's why competition is a good thing. So that's another one of these side effects that could be a little note on the agenda of the to-do list of the bad guys. Also, let's not forget, just think about the morale, think about the emotional devastation. And then people that are losing their jobs, that have lost their homes, that have lost their loved ones, that have lost their way of life. And imagine you have to now move into some sort of government subsidized housing and you've left behind or you've lost your own personal property. Maybe where you went to work, that building or business was damaged or destroyed, so you have no job to go to. Maybe you were the one that owned the business and now you can no longer run your business. So all of this collateral damage that also happens in the aftermath of these storms would point to some benefits of the bad guys because they have so many things on their to-do list of their agenda items. So those are just a few things that come to mind, friends. We've seen it in California with the fires. We've seen it with the floods in places that normally shouldn't be flooding. We've seen it with hurricanes that make U-turns and act crazy. And I, for one, am grateful that it's been a relatively quiet season. I've got one more image to share with you, and let me know if you are experiencing the same thing. So this is from the National Hurricane Center and Central Pacific Hurricane Center. And I just grabbed this prior to coming on screen here. So this is the update. And you can see there's nothing here. There's one that was below 60%, I guess is what this is. And that was just a disturbance. That's not even a tropical cyclone or a storm, and certainly not a hurricane. So it is smooth sailing as far as I can see. All right, friends, I want to thank you so much for being on board. I appreciate you as healthy Americans. Be sure to get on that free Substack, peggyhall.substack.com. Do me a favor, double check to see if you are subscribed. And if you look below the video, you'll be able to see that subscribe button. Hit that again. And that way YouTube can't get away with its funny business of unsubscribing you. Liking the video, commenting on the video, it's simple for you to do, and it helps me a great deal get my messages out to more people. Thanks, everybody, and I look forward to seeing you in tomorrow's broadcast.